Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to another Reddit Stories video. In this video, we'll focus on skinwalkers and people's first-hand experiences and stories with them or on them. And skinwalkers have always interested me a lot, so I'm really excited to get into it. So sit back, relax, and if you're new here, subscribe. It's the channel's goal to be at 250,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I think we can do it, so please subscribe. And alright, anyways, let's get into the first story. Appalachian Mountains. So I want to start off by saying that I am a very skeptical guy. I became an atheist when I was 17, and when my belief in God dissipated, my belief in everything else supernatural went out the window as well. I also want to say that I've lived in Appalachia for all but 4 years of my life, and I'm almost 22. And I've never experienced any of the creepy things people say about the Appalachian Mountains until the story I'm about to tell you. So towards the end of last year, which was 2023, me and two of my friends had sort of simultaneous quarter-life crises, which eventually led us to getting rid of almost all of our belongings, quitting our jobs, leaving our apartments, and living out of our cars and door dashing around the country. Well, on our first night on our big trip, we went to stay with a friend of one of my travel mates. She lived in Tennessee in the Appalachian Mountains, the Smoky Mountains specifically, which, for those of you who don't know, is like a subcategory of the Appalachians. She lived off a back road in the middle of the woods. The first night we were there, she had told us that there were strange occurrences on the property. The house was haunted, and there was something in the woods. She had told us that whatever is in the woods likes to hang out around her shed. She said that one night she was walking up onto her porch when she got the overwhelming feeling of being watched. Becoming fed up with whatever it was, she screamed something along the lines of, "Go the fuck away into the woods," only for something to scream it right back at her. She claimed to have seen it one night from her kitchen window. She said it was peeking around the shed, staring at her. It wasn't an animal, but it wasn't human either. Out of curiosity, I asked her to describe whatever creature she saw in more detail, but she refused. I, being the skeptic that I am, basically disregarded everything she said and forgot about it. Now, because it was our first night on the trip and it was so fun and new to us, we wanted to sleep in our cars, which were parked right in front of the shed I mentioned earlier. Yes, that shed. We hadn't yet made window covers, so we were sleeping in 3 SUVs with uncovered windows completely surrounding us. But I had no issue with this. I thought the worst that could happen would be that I'd wake up with a bear staring at me. So I went to bed peacefully and woke up in the middle of the night, really needing to pee. I got half dressed, put on my shoes, left my car, walked to the edge of the woods, did my business, and got back in my car and went to sleep. I had not a single care in the world. No uneasy feeling, no feeling of being watched, nothing. The next night, I once again wake up, really needing to pee, so just like I did the night before, I sat up in my bed, put on my pants, got my shoes ready, and reached for the door handle. But I couldn't do it. It was like every hair on my body stood on end, and I got this overwhelming feeling of dread and foreboding. Now, I had a makeshift bed in the back of my SUV on top of all the back seats that I flipped down. So I'm sitting there in my bed, looking around through all of my uncovered windows. I can't see anything outside, except for some faint outlines of trees and the glints off of my travel mates' cars. I neither saw nor heard anything that should be putting me on edge. I reached for the door handle again, but I once again got that terrible feeling. I continued to look around, tried to reach for the door, and withdraw my hand. I finally gave up and said, "Screw it," and just peed in an empty water bottle. The next morning, I got up and was talking to my travel mates, and one of them mentioned waking up in the middle of the night out of nowhere and experiencing an overwhelming feeling of being watched. She sat up in her makeshift bed and looked all around, only to see nothing. I can't lie, when she said that, I got a bit of a knot in my stomach. I asked her what time it was when this happened, and she estimated that it was around the same time I woke up, around 3 a.m. I then told both of them about my experience, and we were all a little freaked out about it. When we were headed out to our cars the following night, we noticed that all of the homeowner's 5+ outdoor cats were all sitting on her front porch, which we hadn't seen the last 2 nights. Previously, they would all be scattered around the property, if they were even in sight. We thought it was weird, but we didn't think much of it. We all climbed into our cars and said our goodnights on our walkie-talkies. It was a pretty warm and muggy night for October, so we all had our battery-powered fans running. One of my friends frustratedly reported that her walkie-talkie was dying. Then my other friend reported that their fan had died. Then my walkie-talkie started dying. And it continued until, in the span of 5 minutes, all of our electronic camping gear, walkies, flashlights, and fans had all died. Finding this incredibly creepy, we all decided that we should just sleep in the house to be better safe than sorry. We were gathering up all our things to move inside when I began to hear what sounded like something large walking through the leaves in the woods. I kept stopping what I was doing and looking toward my friend, who were standing right by the woods. They seemed unbothered every time, so I would just continue what I was doing. That was when I heard a louder noise coming from the woods and finally decided to walk over to my friends. Turns out, one of them was standing watch while the other ones gathered the rest of her things. Me and my friend stood there watching my other friend's back, and it kept sounding like whatever was in the woods kept getting closer to us. Soon enough, my friend had gathered all her things, and we calmly, but quickly, went into the house. From what I can remember, we slept in the house the following night as well, but the night after that, one of my friends borrowed some sage from the homeowner and saged all along the wood line and around our vehicles before we got ready for bed. We slept perfectly fine for that night and every night after. No more weird feelings, noises, nothing. Of course, we were pretty much perpetually on edge from then on, but it was never quite the same feeling of dread and foreboding that I had felt before. To be honest, I don't know what to make of all of it. I know I didn't see anything, but the feeling I got was unlike anything I have ever experienced. That was the first and only time in my life where I've gotten that feeling, especially just out of nowhere. I've told the story a few times now, and I've had people tell me that it was just a bear, but I don't think a bear would give me that sort of instinctual feeling of danger when I can't even hear or see it. And I'm fully aware that I may be biased now, but I've lended a bit more credibility to the homeowner stories after my experience. For those of you that are curious, no, we are not still on the trip. Unfortunately, the whole thing went downhill after a couple of months, and we are now integrating back into society. We are, however, all still friends, and no, we did not experience anything like this again, despite staying at several campgrounds in the middle of the woods in other parts of the southeast. I think I saw a skinwalker. About 2 months ago, my husband, 34M, and I, 29F, were staying in a camper on my friend's property in northern Wisconsin. One night I wasn't feeling very well, so I went and laid down in the camper and promptly fell asleep. A few hours later, around 3 a.m., I suddenly woke up and bolted out of the door and started projectile vomiting outside by the window. My husband called out and asked if I was okay. I managed to say, yeah, in between rounds. When I finally finished and felt like I was okay to go back and lay down, I spit a few more times to get rid of the taste, and as I looked up, there was a face about 3 feet in front of me in the darkness. I stared at it, and it stared at me. I was petrified. I couldn't move. But I was also afraid to take my eyes off of it. I slowly started to move my head up, down and side to side to try and get a better angle or a closer look, and as I did so, it began to mimic my movements. There we were, in the darkness of the forest, bobbing up, down, back, forth, slowly leaning closer and closer to one another as we try to figure each other out. I stared straight into its cold, hollow eyes. I couldn't look away in fear of what would happen if I did. It stared back at me, almost as if it didn't know what I was either. It was too dark to make out any features, but the face had the shape of a human face, but what I could see on the body from behind the truck just looked hunched over and distorted. We stayed that way for what felt like forever until I finally managed to call out, "Babe?" "Yeah," my husband responded. "There's something out here," I said, only slightly raising my voice. "What?" he asked. "I don't know, some kind of animal. I'm not sure, but I'm afraid to move. It's just watching me," I whispered almost to myself. He opened the door of the camper and looked out into the darkness. "Where?" he asked, unable to see what I was seeing. "It's right in front of me, just watching," I told him, bewildered that he couldn't see it. He grabbed a flashlight and shined it in front of me, and it was gone. There was nothing there. I never saw it leave. I kept its cold, dead gaze the whole time. How could it not be there? I'm still very confused by this interaction. I know it was there. I saw it wasn't a dream, and I know I wasn't hallucinating. Can anybody tell me what they think it was? Edit. Just to respond to a few comments. I don't drink, and I don't do drugs, so I was not inebriated. I don't remember all the details because I couldn't see very well, but here's what I got. I couldn't tell how tall it was because from what I could see, it looked hunched over and disfigured. I don't think it had any fur. It was pale in color, but again, it was so dark, I'm not sure what color it was. It had big, black, soulless eyes, like looking straight into a void. It had sharp, jagged teeth, and I don't remember a nose at all. Hope this description helps. Maybe it wasn't a skinwalker because I guess they don't leave Navajo land, but it was really scary. I should also mention that where I was in the woods of Wisconsin, was not too far from the Hannahville Indian Reservation in Menominee County, Michigan, but again, not Navajo, so I'm not sure what it was. Personal Skinwalker story from 2017. I'd like to apologize in advance as I'd like to think I'm a decent storyteller in person, but pretty lackluster and long-winded with text. Also, as I write about later, I try and use animal noises to describe some sounds. Take them all with a grain of salt, as even I know that's not the exact thing I heard, but the closest sound I can relate it to or describe it with. I go between I and wheel a couple times, as I describe at the end. My friends and I all discussed what happened to confirm we all in fact heard the same thing and had the same experience. To preface the story and where it takes place, I grew up in the Huron region of Ontario. For those who are not familiar, it's about a 3-hour drive directly west from Toronto, where I now live, on the shore of Lake Huron, not far from the area the tales of the Black Donnellys are from for you dark history lovers. During my history in high school, there was one teacher who had talked about his experiences in a small forested place called Lobb's Bush. Although I wasn't very familiar with it at the time, it was known by a fair number of locals as a very haunted place in the area or where people have had unexplainable but startlingly similar encounters. This teacher was very outspoken about his experiences in that bush, but also his steadfast trust in being a non-believer in the paranormal or supernatural, which in turn made him, of all people, the most fascinating to hear it from. Always ends his stories or answers questions with, "I don't believe it, can't explain it, I'm just telling you what happened." A few years later, in the winter of 2017, both after having him as my teacher in high school and having since moved away to attend my first year of university, I came back to my hometown for my winter break to spend some time with family and catch up with my friend group. For anyone familiar with the small town experience, our favorite activity was the age-old classic of buying a terrible number of cheap reservation cigarettes, hopping in one of our friends' terribly run-down beater cars, and then smoking, chatting, and playing the worst music ever conceived until either the smokes or the gas tank runs out. We were all hovering around 16 to 18, so this was just the most fun degenerate things we could do, on top of finally having a break from all of my uni coursework. This was the first time seeing these friends in a couple of months, so we were all excited to be in one big group again. I won't bore you with all of the earlier antics of the evening, but where this story picks up is after driving around, catching up for a few hours, we pit stop at a random bush trail so some of us could smoke some weed. As we started walking down one of the trails, I remember feeling a very stark change in the atmosphere around us. I didn't really want to express my feelings to ruin the mood, but I definitely felt the need to be on high alert. I've never really had a way to describe the physical feeling apart from my chest feeling heavy, but somehow it was very clear that something was watching us and did not want us there. Every few steps, I needed to look back to make sure something wasn't stalking us. All we had were our phone flashlights, which had a very short distance. The way the trail sat in the bush, it was all new trees, so they curled over the path to almost form a tunnel. It looked as if we walked into a maw of a massive creature, slowly making our way down its throat. We only made it about a few hundred meters before realizing that the calm night was turning into a winter storm. We all agreed to go back to the car and would start making our way back home before it got worse. By the time we made it back to the car, the trees were swinging wildly in the winds and the snow made it hard to see the next couple feet in front of us. Once we made it to the car, we started to drive back to the closest town so as to stay at a friend's place to wait out the storm. While driving, the weather continued getting worse until the snow had practically blinded us while going around a notable halfway there turn. We found out that our estimate of how far to turn the car wasn't enough and felt the car's momentum stall and slide sideways into the ditch. After a short period of us hurling claims of backseat driving and general frustrations, we ended up staying in the ditch for around 5 hours before being rescued by local police and driven the rest of the way into town. During our time in the ditch, I talked about how I felt while walking in the woods. We all agreed with the feeling of knowing we shouldn't be there, and none of us spoke up until now. Only after that did our friend in the driver's seat, and the only one familiar with these particular back roads, inform us that we were in fact walking through Lob's Bush. Fast forward some time to, I believe, my second semester reading week. I'm back home with my friends and back to the same old antics. After a particularly good night of catching up, we decided to go revisit Lob's Bush, as none of us had been there since getting caught in the ditch, and the weather was already warm this month with far less snow. I remember feeling almost excited to go back. Rather than dark, impenetrable clouds and snow, tonight the moon was out and barely needed flashlights to see where we were going. We parked the car in the same spot and grabbed all necessary smoking apparatuses and a pack of smokes for the driver and me to share, as of course neither time are we dumb enough to get our designated driver high. As we started walking into the trail, I started realizing landmarks that I had missed from my first time there, with the moonlight making everything more visible. I walked through the same threshold as before and was pleasantly surprised that I didn't feel like I was being watched or unwelcome to walk through. After a point, I had almost forgotten that I was in the infamous woods and was enjoying a late night walk through the forest, laughing with my friends. After walking further down the trail, we finally came to an opening. On the right side of the trail, the trees had parted out to showcase the edge of the field, nicely lit by the moonlight. On the left side, the bush clears out, so there's a lovely section of grass and light foliage parting to show a small stream cutting through. It looked like a naturally made auditorium, with the stream cutting through like a main walkway. Sparse trees, so plenty of seating for an audience, and the trees opening and leading down to the farmer's field as the stage. In all honesty, I had completely forgotten we were there to smoke and was just enamored with how pretty it was. As we found a spot to stop and ready our lights to smoke, our friend had the bright idea to exclaim, "Yo, I forgot I've got a Roman candle." As we all turned to look, they had already gotten their lighter out and was proceeding to light the candle. Again, we were late teens. We were idiots. She proceeds to point the candle towards the big clearing to the field, every once in a while moving it around so it is not all shooting in the same spot. Going higher and higher into the air, she finally points it in the opposite direction towards the wood. With surprising accuracy, none of the shots actually hit anything before going out until one finally hits a tree near the stream and spirals into the woods where we can't see it. Within no more than a second's time, this blood-curdling scream comes from the exact place the Roman candle bounced into the woods beyond our view. We all completely froze, unsure of what to make of it as the scream continued on for a worrisome amount of time. I can only describe it as a cross between a deeper version of a howler's monkey's roar and an ear-ringing whine like an elk's bugle, going higher in pitch as it kept screaming. I remember my ears vibrating from how loud it was. I wanted to cover them, but we were all frozen in place from it. Finally, one of us snapped into reality and yelled, "Run!" and bolted off towards the farmer's field. We all in turn started running away from the ongoing scream from within the woods. As we were running, the scream finally stopped after about 10 seconds of constant noise. There was no breath or change in the scream apart from pitch. It was able to yell at that volume for longer than I've heard any animal do. Before we could even think, we heard a heavy rustling in the woods as whatever it was took a deep inhale to scream again. The inhale was just as terrifying, sounding like an alligator's bellow mixed with a hyena's laugh. I know both sounds I'm describing are from exhaling, but you could tell this was a guttural, full-chested, and preparatory inhale before screaming again. Unlike the first scream that almost sounded reactionary, surprised by the Roman candle almost hitting it, this was clearly an angry roar. Whatever it was really fucking big, with the lungs to prove it, and now moving towards us. It was even louder, and what I could only assume was now pointed towards us. Even though we were all heavy smokers at the time, we all ran as fast as we possibly could without looking back. Absolutely terrified from the second continuous roar that was now gaining on us. After about 15 seconds, the scream stopped abruptly. It took us a second to realize the noise was gone. We turned around to see that we had made it out of the woods and onto the field. We only looked back briefly to see we had put around 50 to 100 meters between us and the edge of the bush. Even before we could really think straight, we shakily agreed to make our way to the closest road to make our way back to the front of the bush to find where we parked. It was only once we got to the road and caught our smoked out breath did one of us finally ask if we all heard and felt that. We all talked briefly, but were too on edge to actually converse. About 20 minutes later, we finally made it back to the road and had the car in sight. We all started to calm down as we had some time to process and let the adrenaline wear off. We unlocked the car, all got into our respective seats with our bags. None of us had the time to take it off before the first scream happened. As the driver finally turned the car on and the headlights flooded the woods in front of us, the front passenger just screamed, "Drive, drive, drive." The driver, without looking, cranked the car into reverse and turned around to back out quickly and go down the back road as fast as he could beside the bush. The friend who screamed started to freak out all over again. I was sitting directly behind him with my hand on his shoulder from the back seat. As we tried to ask what was wrong, I was looking over my shoulder to look into the woods. I genuinely felt like time had slowed down as I looked over, with the same feeling of something watching me like my first time in the woods. As the trees passed by, I could clearly make out two fully open eyes reflecting back at me. I could clearly make out two full reflective circles. I was completely frozen and couldn't look away. I couldn't tell if the eyes were locked on me or the whole vehicle, or even what light they were reflecting off of as we were driving beside the wood. They were clearly further back into the woods by a couple of meters, so I couldn't make out how tall it was, but I could very easily see they were attached to a head much larger and taller than a human. I completely forgot about comforting the passenger in front of me and instead tried to turn and see it for longer through the back window as we kept driving, but had completely lost the visual. I couldn't even make a sound, but my mind was racing. The longer I sat, the longer I wondered how the hell it got to where I could see it after we had sped away from the parking spot. I don't know how much it saw from the car, but I know it saw me. It saw all of us in those woods. I don't know how to describe it other than that I felt I was fully prey, and whatever it was a predator that knows me now. After driving for a while on our way back to a friend's farm, we were all able to speak about what had happened. We all heard the same noises, heard the rustling, heard the same far too long screams, and finally, the other passenger and I both agreed on seeing the same wide eyes staring at us. Neither of us got a good look at what it was, but both agreed that it was staring at us and was too big to make out. That passenger also made a comment that, even though it was a couple of meters into the woods, when he saw it, it had to be much bigger than a human. After a couple of hours more conversing about it, we all finally felt comfortable driving back to our respective homes. Every couple of months, when we'd see each other again, we'd make certain to each other that we all saw the same thing, as we wanted to make sure none of us were truly losing it mentally. I sat on the events of this story for about a year, not really sure who to tell or who would believe any of us for that matter. Once I finally felt comfortable talking and researching things similar, I came to a personal conclusion that it might be something along the lines of a skinwalker, and started looking further into stories about it. As there was so much talk of people having similar encounters or strange happenings in Lob's Bush, I really wanted to entertain and research any and all possibilities. On top of that, although raised somewhat Christian in school, it was never a dogma I really followed or was heavy into the idea of other powers until this happened. For me, if this was real and it happened to me, I couldn't disprove anything, and has vastly changed the way I look at any form of religion or spiritual beliefs. Through friends and a few events, I know a fair number of indigenous groups and older members that I felt believed enough of the old ways to tell the story. All three elders essentially said the same thing, along the very blunt line of, "Yep, that sounds like a skinwalker," and a few shared similar encounters that other friends and family have had. Only within the last, 2 years, I talked to a few more people about it, and one friend finally recommended that I Google what a skinwalker sounded like. I finally looked online and heard some very similar sounds that sent the same "it's watching" chills down my spine, and felt that, on top of everything else, was enough confirmation for me. To this day, now have started my own spiritual path with respect to the lands and essentially now being on Turtle Island that I walk on. In addition to the classic "don't whistle or say its name at night," I've made it very clear to my friends who have all heard the story and respectfully know me as a outdoorsy camping friend that if I ever feel anything similar to being watched or that we shouldn't be in these woods, to get the fuck out with me. And alright, that wraps up the Reddit Skinwalker Encounters stories, and I hope you enjoyed these. I enjoyed reading them. Thank you for watching to the end, and like and subscribe if you'd like to see more. And alright, until next time, see ya.